So can I welcome up Nick from RugbyDAO, one of the co-founders. Very topical. Lisa, who we've already met, who's a good friend of the Manchester Blockchain Alliance. Mohamed, who's from Animoca Brands, who's come all the way from London. It must be hot in here because he's took his coat off, you know. And Lee, another good friend of the community who is representing many platforms tonight. So thanks for coming on board. I think the best way to start is to get everyone to introduce themselves and just tell them what they love about DAOs. I think in this half, we're going to try and make it more about the community. DAOs are an amazing way to bring people together and wrap governance around a cause. So I think if we start at this end with Nick, do you want to really just tell us all about RugbyDAO and your fascination with why you think we need a DAO and what's interests you in them?
Yeah, absolutely. So the concept of RugbyDAO is about 18 months or so old. As a player through my kind of early years up to 2025, I got a great deal out of the culture that's associated with rugby union and just growing up and shared experiences with pals and teammates. And I think there's a huge opportunity for DAOs and blockchain to build a more equitable future for the game of rugby. So my core tenet around and the concept around the RugbyDAO is that the sustainable future of rugby is built on a more equitable, inclusive, accessible ecosystem for new talent, for the next generation of fans, for players, and also to bring those who are a little bit older in the tooth into additive revenues, interesting experiences that kind of capture the imagination of them and keep them in the game. So that's a little bit about me and DAOs.
Perfect. It's just rugby union, not the league form of the game?
At the moment, yeah. At the moment, I realise where I am. But I'm actually a Yorkshire boy by birth. But yeah, so wrong side of the Pennines, I apologise too. But yeah, at the moment it's union based, but I think we're starting to explore with lots of stakeholders in the game how we bring the right talent in, how we create the right formats just for boys and girls to play rugby wherever they are without boundaries.
Totally understand, I'm joking. Lisa, do you want to just talk about some of the positive DAO things, that you've seen recently?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everybody. I'm Lisa. Shall I quickly
Yeah. Well,
I'm
you did the bit at the start.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Yeah. So what I think is interesting about DAOs and things that I've seen that are good lately is, I suppose, coming at this from originally I was a corporate lawyer working with a lot of listed companies, and I've then subsequently worked with many non-profits and charities. I was a specialist social economy lawyer working with cooperatives, and I think within the DAO movement, it's difficult to say really, because some of the comments earlier have been about how some projects don't necessarily match up to the promise of being truly decentralized, and there's a lot of work still to be done. And I guess coming at this from a background of working with cooperatives and non-profits and understanding some of the governance methodologies that traditional corporations put in place to protect communities and make sure that there's not issues with leakage of value out of the community, especially with charities and non-profits. I think there's a long way to go for DAOs, and I'm not sure that I have really seen many DAOs coming at this from a perspective of having really great formal governance in place, or thinking about the way in which they maybe defend the treasury from attack. How often could it happen that maybe if the values under management in a treasury exceed the total value of the DAO, it could easily be possible that someone might dissolve the DAO and take that value out, or affecting proposals that no one would ever pay for that are not at market value. These things are really worrying, and I just think there's lots of work to be done. But in terms of good things in the ecosystem, there's really cool projects. We had a Pizza DAO meetup about a year ago, which was there's some really cool ideas like that, and I was really inspired with RugbyDAO and KlimaDAO and everybody here. Pretty interested in Klima, particularly around the promise of making carbon credits fairer, more functional and more transparent, which is why I was interested in that project. Particularly in the carbon markets, there's double double counting sometimes is a big issue, and there's inefficiencies. So looking forward to seeing what else, where the sector goes in future.
Yeah, so Mohamed, when I started in blockchain, I always wish people could have job titles like head of tokenomics, so congratulations.
Or commiserations, but
I'm sure it's an interesting job. I think can you explain a little bit about what Animoca is? Because I don't think everyone will know what they do in the industry, and then obviously a little bit about yourself, if that's okay, DAOs,
absolutely.
Tokens.
I hate that question, by the way, because Animoca, it's a behemoth within the space. It's normally seen from one of two angles, either as a VC, so people come up and be like, can you invest in my project? Or you're a games company, can you guys help us build out our game? But fundamentally, what we're really going for is an ecosystem play. At the core of our belief system is the open metaverse, is true ownership of your assets, and blockchain enables that. And we try to leverage everything within our ecosystem. We have a portfolio of over 450 companies, nearly 20 subsidiaries going strong, Sandbox probably being the most household name within those subsidiaries. So we essentially do everything, so to speak, but a core focus on building out this open metaverse and having the VC arm to invest and actually aid in that structure. A bit of background on myself. Where do I start? I'm a mathematician by trade. I was in education for 10 years as a high school teacher. I got into crypto 2017, made and then lost a lot of money, and sort of been like, well, why did this happen? And then that's when I discovered the lack of tokenomics within the space. Sort of went down the tokenomics rabbit hole in 2018, and you can argue part of my soul is still there, but really trying to figure out why no token economy as of now has been successful. You can argue maybe Bitcoin and Ethereum are the successful token economies, but nothing as of yet, and maybe we can dive a bit deeper into that later on.
Yeah, that's definitely fascinating. Lee, so Lee, you're here representing the UK Ape Club.
Yes, I am. So a couple of the guys
we have
are out
some
here as well.
Apes Club members in the house, so that's a perfect, hopefully there's not any votes
Support
going on
really,
right
because,
now. But Lee, do you want to explain what that is and what it means to you?
Yeah, sure. I got into Web3 and NFT stuff for the communities. That's what I've got a series of media platforms here in Manchester that are built around micro and macro communities. It's what I'm really interested in. That's what got me involved in this. Part of that, I ended up buying a mutant ape, which then I discovered this UK Ape Club, met a few of these guys, and we've basically got, for all intents and purposes, a Discord group, and it's holders within the Bored Ape Yacht Club ecosystem that are based in the UK. It's basically that simple, right? The interest, I think, for today potentially, and where we'll get into, and especially with Mohamed as well, is so we're all in, well, not all of us, but most of us are part of, we're holders of Ape Coin, so we're in the Ape Coin DAO. And what we've done is, as a general group of UK holders, we've delegated all our Ape Coin into a UK delegate wallet. So that is quite an interesting thing, I guess. I certainly find it quite interesting anyway, because of how that kind of plays into the community. But yeah, communities.
No, yeah, I think it's really interesting. And you saw that one of the earliest games on the blockchain I was involved in was called Cheese Wizards. Does anyone remember Cheese Wizards?
Oh, of course it was, Andy.
And they
Cheese Wizards.
It's what the CryptoKitties people tried to do, when they run out of ideas. But that was one of the first DAOs I saw formed, because there was like a battle, and people out of their own backs formed a DAO to try and game the battle of who would win this huge cheese prize. And the Cheese Wizards, there was a thing called the Mold that was catching up with them. It didn't last that long, but it was great fun at the time. Still got a t-shirt. So I'm going to ask the first question to Nick. So numerous football clubs, sports clubs have been managed by the supporters, and there's been a famous instance of a football club being managed by a DAO recently. I don't know if you've heard of it, WAGME, and it hasn't gone so great. So what do you think the key is to success, and what do you think we can learn from some of these previous attempts to collaboratively run a community-based endeavor?
Yeah, I mean, they nearly got demoted, right? They were very close, which is probably not a good first-year result. But I think there's some really interesting contrast. If you remove blockchain and Web3, the majority of cases where fans have taken ownership of clubs or sporting entities is because they're distressed assets. It's because something is broken. There's been a single point of failure in the traditional system, which has just left the fans to dig the club out of a hole. So I think one of the things that you can learn from that is there is an opportunity to start to remove some of those single points of failure by engaging community in the right way, not just fans, but players, those who are building from grassroots level. So it's not just a club to fan thing, which I think we can learn a lot from. And then we can probably learn that in many cases fans don't want to be in control of clubs, right? Because when they get to the point where it's sustainable again and they can bring someone in who can support the ownership, a Wrexham type of idea, then of course they're happy as Larry to give that ownership back to someone who has deeper pockets. So I would say it's about understanding the fans' motivation, where and how they want to get involved. They will, if they have to, support that club until the nth degree. But in most cases, I don't think they want to do that. And so part of the reason we started with the community and with the fan base was the RugbyDAO was to actually understand how and where they want to engage with the game to help it grow. Not just say, do you want to own a club? It's interesting when you look at the contrast between what happens, say, for example, in the sports DAOs in the US. We're going to buy an NBA club, we're going to buy a golf course, we're going to buy an NFL team, or whatever it is. I think there's something interesting, certainly in terms of the European and British kind of culture versus that American kind of sports style, which is we want to buy a thing and we're going to be in the top league of X, Y, and Z. And I think what we've seen, certainly from fans, is there's much more groundswell around having more access to clubs and the community and the whatever they've supported from generation to generation, but not having to necessarily make big decisions.
Andy, are you in LinksDAO?
I'm not in LinksDAO, but I'm in the Discord. I've managed to sneak in.
Yeah, because they bought the golf club.
They bought a golf club called
Scotland,
Spey Bay. LinksDAO is a golf-based DAO that did raise funds to buy a golf club, and it's run quite successfully, to be honest. If anyone wants to check out one that works quite well.
Yeah, and I'm absolutely. I think it's fascinating because it works for that group, right? I think I don't know what the demographic, the breakdown of owners of Links tokens is, of those passes is. I think there's quite a lot of US folks in there who like to golf in different countries, and so being able to come and travel to Scotland and play an interesting course and go to St Andrews is powerful.
And I think what happens with some of them DAOs, what's been interesting, it's like secondary use cases have evolved in the DAO. So now all the members in the DAO have created sort of a member program. So if you're a member of a club anywhere in the world, you can invite other people and say, well, I've got certain tea times, come and join me. And I think that's a little bit what the Ape Club does in some ways. It brings people with a common interest together. So I'm going to skip Lisa, so don't give me the evils. But Mohamed, no, I'll come back. It's the way they've done the sheet, trust me. Tokenization, right? You've already admitted that it's not really cracked some of these nuts, but why are they so important? What do you see? What do they bring to the party in these instances of community and DAOs and in terms of collaboration?
So I think when NFTs really started kicking off, my thesis was in-game assets would be what would drive NFTs forward. I was completely wrong. It was PFP projects, and fundamentally because it was easy with the apes example, it's easy to see we're in the same community because we both have apes up as our PFP. So there's that level of trust or reputation that was built in quite easily, and you can easily associate someone who's in the same community as you by their PFP. So that was sort of layer one. But as with anything, we always want to innovate and want to look at, well, how can we take this deeper? And to bring it maybe to DAOs, or prior to getting to DAOs, why a lot of token economies have failed. There's multiple different reasons, but fundamentally one of those reasons is, from a DAO perspective, is token-weighted voting. And I have a certain number of tokens and I can be a whale and I can come in and I can buy out a vote, so to speak, which doesn't make any sense. The other aspect, we were speaking about sports DAOs earlier on and why a lot of them maybe haven't gone to plan, is you're asking people who don't have the subject matter expertise to go and make a decision on something they truly have no idea what they're making a decision on. outside of the fact that this influencer in my community said X, so I'm going to vote for X, and that's it. So there's two reasons there. We spoke about reputation earlier on, and I really think one of the missing layers, and when we really think about tokenization, it's not just a single layer, it has multiple layers to it, and it's the order in which you go to tokenize whatever ecosystem is being tokenized. But fundamentally, and the purpose of this panel is what's at the heart of each ecosystem. It's us, it's the community, and it's what the community wants moving forward. But it's also making sure there are stage gates in place to mitigate against, again, wrong decisions being made. And what we've seen, I worked on ApeCoin prior to the DAO being launched. And let's be completely honest, every DAO that is launched is an experiment. And once something is on chain, you cannot take it back. So sometimes you just need to take a step back and realize these are all live experiments that are happening at the same time. And there's so much good data out there that we can look into and understand what's working. Why is it working? What are the conditions around this that are making it working? To the other end of the spectrum is, why has this failed miserably? And then just really start to nitpick what layer we want to focus on to understand why something has or hasn't worked.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think from my point of view, everything's still experimentation. And I guess with the regulation and stuff, it all needs to evolve, but it doesn't discourage me. It's like everyone's here talking about this, and this is going to get better over time, but obviously the horizon's a bit tricky. So next on the sheet...
Could I just jump in there, just for transparency? We work with Mo and the guys at Animoca, and we unpicked quite a few things early on that we'd made some assumptions based on what we thought the community and the approach would be, and it was really kind of valuable and interesting to start to compare and contrast with what else has happened in the market, but then also really drive from your community motivation. So we started by going, it's one of these, and pretty much everyone we spoke to in the rugby community said, so what are we going to buy?
Yeah.
We're like, we're not going to do, that's not how it's going to work. Oh, good, because I don't really want to buy, and it's a different version of DAO and community, which is, but with Mo and the guys, it was really interesting to just unpick those things where you don't cookie cutter, copy and paste something that exists out there and there.
Yeah, so, and that leads me on to the next question for Lee, really. Like, let's talk about the UK Ape Club. It's like, it's founded out of a shared interest. So what gets people out of bed in the morning onto that Discord? What makes them want to vote, delegate, put the time out? You're spending your own time voting, putting proposals. And this is like a relatively small DAO. So what is it that drives the people in the DAO and the community, do you think?
I'll just clear up the DAO bit, but the thing that gets us all out of bed in the morning is the first one to put the GM in the Discord. So, but anyway, outside of that, which is usually a massive train, which is great, right? Because I'll open it up at 7 a.m. or whatever. There's already 5 in there. By 9 o'clock, there's 15 people. So that's just a nice thing, right? That people are there, and whatever, and then you're off for the day, and we're all supposed to go to work, but we're not. We're all on Discord. But the way that we've got it, UK Ape Club is basically just a group of people in the UK that have got the Yuga assets, right? And then, but we don't have a DAO, to be clear. So we're the ApeCoin DAO. Basically, what we realized to some degree is that we were all in there. Snapshot AIPs are put out, proposals, should the DAO spend money on this, right? And we were all going on and putting our votes, but actually one of the guys who basically founded the UK Ape Club said, well, okay, I'm going to set up a delegate wallet. Let's all just point all our ApeCoin at this one wallet, and that increases then we have a unified voting power, right? And so, that made us, I think, the 5th highest delegate wallet, something, I can't remember what it was, but it basically gave us a bit of a voice, right? So that's quite interesting as well, because now when people are putting AIPs, they're kind of asking, can they come in our Discord?
Proposal, right?
Proposal, sorry, proposal. So they're then saying, can we come in your, they'll get invited in, they'll have a chat to us, see if we like what they're doing or whatever else. Now, what we'll then do is we've literally got a channel in the Discord where one of the guys does a roundup of all the proposals for that week, and we, as individuals, have our own sort of vote of yes or no. Now, what's quite interesting about that, or again, I use interesting quite loosely, right? Because, but from my perspective, it's quite interesting because some of the guys that are in there have got 3, 4, 5 times more ape than me, if not more. Therefore, actually, their voting power as an individual is way more than mine, but they only get 1 vote within our delegate. So that's sort of quite interesting because we've created almost a non-whale structure in our own way of voting to some way, which I think then potentially becomes quite interesting when you talk about the Mocaverse DAO because, you know, Mo, what you were saying before about what people think of an Animoca, I think of it as a whale in the ApeCoin DAO, which is a completely different thing. I don't know, maybe you can speak to that one.
Where to start? So for those that don't know, Mocaverse is an NFT project that was incubated and is owned or was released directly by Animoca brands. And given that we've invested or have participated in a lot of projects, we own a lot of tokens on balance sheet. So what we wanted to do, again, from an experimentation point of view, is how can we leverage the Animoca community to be active participants in different DAO ecosystems? Given that ApeCoin DAO we were core contributors to that. Our chairman and co-founder was also one of the very first, was on the special council, which if we're thinking from DAO structures, the special council was 5 members that were put there to act as a layer to stop maybe any nefarious or proposals that were going through that were against the ethos of the DAO, for example. So even if a whale did come in and wanted to do something naughty, there was still a real life aspect there to stop it where not everything is fully automated. But back to the Mocaverse point, it's how can we look to leverage communities? Because fundamentally, to the point I was making earlier, it's what powers all of this. It is communities, it is an experiment. And we delegated initially 1.5 million ape, which I think made us the 3rd or 4th largest ApeCoin holder. And to say, well, we have 8,888 Moca NFTs, 1 Moca, 1 vote, and you get to come in and what it really was is you get to have a bigger say in the ApeCoin DAO versus maybe someone who only owns 10 ape, 100 ape, 1,000 ape, because of the combined power of that 1.5 million ApeCoin. And that was perceived from different, again, depending on who you ask within the ApeCoin community. Some were like, this is great, Animoca is throwing their full weight behind this. And others were like, well, actually, you guys are a whale and we've been here since day dot, and you guys haven't. We have, but it's
I'm not
it's
negative.
No. I know.
Because what you've done, but that explanation there is similar to like what we've done. You basically take the because everyone it's one vote. Yeah, experimentation, right? Yeah.
But then what we've also seen is like one of the biggest ApeCoin holders. He's just gone and brought more ape, and he's outright become number 1. So we announced, I think it was yesterday, that we're actually upping the amount of ape that we're delegating from balance sheet to the Mocaverse community.
It's up by 2 million.
Up by 2 million. So we went from 1.5 to 3.5, and I think we had a further 300K from other people in the community who delegated their tokens to us.
Luckily, it's cheaper these days.
It's much cheaper, but which is actually a good segue into the point of incentive alignment. As of now, everyone in the ApeCoin DAO owns ApeCoin, and a lot of the proposals coming through are asking for resources, ApeCoin, for them to be able to build something, to do something. Anything that's paid out from the treasury is paid out in ApeCoin, which means if I'm paying for a service, I need to cash out. Now, me as a holder of ApeCoin, I'm disincentivized to vote yes on these proposals, knowing that the price of ApeCoin is now going to go lower. So there isn't an incentive alignment using that. But when ApeCoin DAO was released, what, 1.5 years ago, who could have predicted that? And it's fundamentally, again, from a token economy perspective, it's down to product. And when we look at product, utility, use cases where people can actually spend the token, within the Yuga or the ApeCoin, again, there is a differentiation. Within the ApeCoin ecosystem, there isn't enough products there for people to be sinking ape back into the ecosystem. So it's quite a linear trend from that aspect.
It's not circular.
So
Come on quickly, Lee. Come
Well, I
on.
wanted to jump onto Lise, you see, because we were talking about something earlier about the bleed out of the the bleed out of a DAO. You had a better term for it than me, but I was saying, some of the proposals come in and then basically they're just kind of, give me X amount of ape, and then they'll just turn it into stable or whatever, and then it just kills the coin. And we were talking about what was the term you used? Sorry.
Leakage, value leakage.
Because
there's something that companies talk about when they're thinking about their supply chain. It's like locking in value basically. And I think we were talking about that and saying, could you put a proposal forward where you maybe limit the sorts of proposals people can put to the community so that it's only certain types and I think you were talking about some of the challenges of passing that kind of vote when you.
Yeah, I said Mocaverse wouldn't vote for it. No, I didn't really.
But equally, like it's going to be in the incentive of any investor as well to make sure that you're not just receiving scam proposals and that value is just disappearing based on, we'll make some videos and those videos are nothing like what you would pay for the market value and there's no contract terms and you don't have any of the usual commercial stuff in place. So, yeah.
So I've got another question here, Lisa. It's really about we're talking about DAOs, right? Everyone's in the room. Maybe someone wants to form a DAO. Go down the pub, form pub DAO. We've got 10% off in the pub opposite, by the way, just say from Brentwood. If someone wants to do that, is there any obstacles? Do they have to be fearful? Can you form these loose arrangements? Do they need to go and form an entity in the Cayman Islands? Should people be fearful of DAOs, or is it something that can be quite playful and community-based?
I think with small projects, it's a tricky one really, because clearly if it's just a small group of friends who are doing something together and tokens are not going to be transferred out of that group, then there seems limited risk. With a legal hat on, obviously, there's been, we were talking earlier about the DAO case in the United States, and I think the risk is that sometimes you might start something off and it could grow or change over time. And increasingly, people have been looking at DAOs and saying, what are the legal relationships between the people who are involved? And in the DAO case, obviously, that resulted in people who were involved being responsible for regulatory failings. And there can be other issues maybe as well, like thinking a little bit ahead about what sorts of assets people are going to share. So, even if I was just setting up perhaps a netball club or anything of that nature, I would still have to think about what's going to happen when you start collecting some funds and you need to pay for things, how you're going to get a bank account. So possibly does merit having a bit more formality at the very beginning and just maybe planning what the ultimate goal of that DAO would be. But I think it'd be really sad if we lose the ability for creative projects to just experiment, because that's one of the most interesting things. And I really would hope that perhaps within the laws there could be safe harbors or ways of people being given that space to just play around with the technology and realize what's possible.
Awesome. Well, I think that rounds up my questions, but luckily we have lots of people in the audience. So I'm going to send out my roving reporter, Ian, to find some, avoid the people vape jumpers on.
Hi, my name's Joe from Superchain. My question is about the difference in the interests of small token holders and large token holders. My experience with DAOs is you often get a lot of low information voters that score, and you also get people who are small token holders but are very dedicated and will put a lot of value into something, but all the value ends up actually being accrued by the large token holders, who will then cash out on these small dedicated people. But also having lots of small token holders makes it difficult to align interests. And generally there's just a few people who are actually leading ideas, who are well organized and so on. And you can see that in private companies, like people taking companies private because they don't want to be beholden to lots of shareholders. So just generally, I guess to everyone on the panel, could you talk a bit more about this conflict between small and large token holders and how we might resolve it?
I think you're 100% right that there is a disparity there, and it fundamentally is a payoff space to where you want to be on that spectrum. I think where we are in the space right now, it's a clear and obvious problem, and it's just what creative solutions over the next 6 to 12 months are going to come out. I'm a big fan of quadratic voting, but I also understand that when we talk about...
Is it worth mentioning what that actually is?
Yes, so when we think about voting in a standard sense, it's normally binary, or if it's in Web3, it's yes, no, or abstain. and that's it. You don't really have an opportunity to split a vote. I can't vote some of my votes yes and some of my votes no. And what we've seen in the real world is two-party politics. It gives us Brexit. It gives us people like Trump and so on and so forth. So we know binary voting doesn't actually work to give us a result that's meaningful. What quadratic voting does, I don't know, maybe we're all hungry, we want to go for a meal together afterwards. There's what, McDonald's, pub food, KFC, Burger King. We're all given 100 credits and we have to allocate our vote based on which restaurant we want to go to. But the way it works is, what a quadratic function is, it takes a number and it multiplies it by itself. So if I'm giving, let's say, 5 of my credits to something, it's actually using 25 of my credits, because 5 squared, or 5 times 5 is 25. But what that allows you to do really is 2 things. Number 1 is split your vote, but more importantly, number 2 is really think about how you're voting, because now every one of your credits count in terms of how I'm allocating my credits. It might be in the silly example I've given that I don't mind the Burger King, but maybe a fish and chips from the pub isn't bad, so I split my vote between Burger King and fish and chips. Someone else might be a McDonald's Maxi, so they go all in on McDonald's, for example. So, but again, we look at voter numbers and turnout in Web 2 and in Web 3, and it's low. So if you add that layer of complexity too soon, you're going to lose more voters coming in, and the real chance we have at giving the power back to the people, it evaporates, so to speak. So again, it is a payoff space. I do agree there is a fundamental problem there. I know we're working on different solutions, other outfits in the space are working on different solutions, but fundamentally it has to be something that's simple, and it also has to be something that can scale over time with where we're at, with where the technology is at as well. Snapshot, the most widely used, and I think this point was made earlier, voting mechanism, so to speak, is actually off chain. It's not on chain. Again, it's great for security, but is it great? Completely different question. So we're getting there. We're not there yet. Sometimes you just need to take a step back, zoom out, and see where we're at in terms of the timeline of where Web3 was at. I mean, the first block of Bitcoin was mined, January 14th, 2009? We've come such a long way from then to where we are today. And I genuinely expect in the next 2, 3, 4 years, we'll see a lot of differences and a lot of evolution in DAOs and in the space in general.
Of course you can. Just still on that, like what you were saying before about, which I really liked, about how, one mocker, one vote, which basically takes your massive pot and says, okay, our holders get one vote. Is the issue there then that, which I think is brilliant, by the way, not footing it at all, I think it's great. Is the issue there then that people can then buy more mockers and then get more votes?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, but I guess to take a step right back to the very beginning, the way the distribution mechanism worked for these Mocaverse NFTs is that they were distributed to people within the Animoca ecosystem to begin with. So who was that? It was direct employees of Animoca brands. It was also our subsidiaries. It was also our portfolio companies. So there was a wide distribution of these NFTs to begin with, of people who we know are active within the space. So Sarah, I'm gonna pick on you for this one. So Sarah's Nifty's is one of our portfolio companies. Each of our portfolio companies had the option and subsidiaries of having 3 for free and then having to pay for a further 3. So a maximum of 6 in that case. So it was really looking at how we can decentralize ownership early on. And then the reason why we wanted these to be tradable was fundamentally we have a lot of supporters of Animoca brands who sit on the outside. How can they come in and have a voice within the ecosystem? We look at the tradable amounts, and whenever I have time and I can have a quick look on OpenSea or Blur, it's normally 1%, maximum 2% that are listed. So there isn't a big amount that are listed that allows more whales to come in. And if we're going to talk about floor price, the floor price has been, the lowest has been more recently is maybe around the 0.6 ETH, given that the mint price, if I remember correctly, was 0.138. So and 0.62 today. So I mean, she's on OpenSea more than I am, clearly, about that. But it's there, and also with the voting, there is a quorum that has to be reached. It's not just a case of one person votes. I think that was the example of the proposal I think Alex was speaking about that was put over the weekend in a DAO, and it was pushed through. There's a quorum of minimum, I think 311 Mocaverse NFTs need to vote out of a circulating supply of just over 5,000. So again, it is a low quorum if we look at it from a percentage perspective, but we have to start somewhere.
Yeah, indeed. Do you want to take another question, Ian? And go on, you can do it.
Yeah. This is probably for Mohamed. Just out of curiosity, just from a tokenomics perspective, it might be hard to answer this question, but obviously the allocation of tokens from a layer 1 to a GameFi game to a DeFi protocol is going to be different. But based on your experience, we're obviously running an experiment, but what do you find has been the best practices that have worked over and over again for projects? And likewise, what's been the most detrimental things to a project's success from a tokenomics allocation perspective?
The second part of the question is the easiest, giving out too many tokens to investors, to the team, to core stakeholders, because then it's not really decentralized. What we need to realize is any tokens that do go out specifically to investors, in most instances, will relate to sell pressure. And if you have a vesting period, so this is when the tokens begin to unlock and I can sell them into the market, and it's a short vesting period, what tends to happen is the investors dump, there's limited liquidity, the token dies, and that's the end of the ecosystem. But the other side of that is projects need to raise funds, and in the height of the market, the easiest way to gain access to capital was via fungible token raises. So there's a catch-22 there. And the other side of it, in terms of what makes it successful, it really depends on what is the purpose of that ecosystem. If it's an investment DAO, then yes, you want most of the tokens to be going to the investors because they have the right over whatever's in the treasury. If we're going for maybe an ecosystem-based DAO, where we want the community to really be leading the charge, then you want minimum at least 50% of the tokens clearly outlined to the community. Then you need launch contributors at the beginning. Again, ApeCoin DAO is a great example where it wasn't, people think ApeCoin DAO and Yuga are the same thing. There is a clear separation between both. Yuga was one of the launch contributors, but there were other launch contributors for that ecosystem. So they get some skin in the game from being launch contributors. And it's fundamentally, I think, the allocations is an issue, but also a lot of the vesting schedules are linear. Growth is non-linear. How do you map something non-linear to something that's linear? And that's been a big failing in the space. But again, going back to the investors, to try to sell an investor, you might get your tokens at this month, but these are the preset conditions that have to be met. And if they're not met, you're then going to get them at this point in time. It becomes too complicated, and most investors will literally be throwing holy water or holding the cross up thinking you're a vampire or something to try and scare you away. So there is a challenge there, but it's different for each ecosystem and market conditions as well. Raising in a bull market, very different to raising in a bear market.
Thanks, Mohamed. Ian?
I have a train at 9:15, so I'm going to need to run in about
right,
1
okay.
more minute. So
you can excuse
yes,
yourself
if,
with a little mini round of applause.
please. Cheers. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone.
Take one more question.
Go on, guys.
From panel. You'll get there, don't worry. I'll do it in 10.
So my question is specifically at Nick. So some people say that customers don't actually know what they want, and also in your case, it'll be fans don't actually know what they want. So what's your opinion on that kind of emphasis where the managers actually know best, they're educated in what they do. So, a community-led thing is, I guess, some people would say, is set for failure on that kind of stuff. So what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, I think, if you look at things from a pure marketing perspective, there was always going to be that empirical data that brands and businesses lead the market instead of consumer need. But I think certainly for RugbyDAO, we need to think more broadly than that. So it's about the whole rugby ecosystem. It's not just about the fans. It's about the playing talent. It's about grassroots. It's about the rights holders, and it's about the change in balance and relationship between those groups. I think the only way you truly find that out is to have a really broad set of projects and test and learn, and not have everything behind on one horse, to mix my sporting metaphors. But just to consider that actually there will be cases where the fan motivations are absolutely bob on and they're right. And if you keep projects broad, we've deliberately with the RugbyDAO we've got representation in over 30 markets. We've got current playing talent. We've got retired talent, we've got custodians of the game, we've got rights holders. So we've got loads and loads of people feeding into what those projects need and should look like. And hopefully through the course of time, the right things bubble up instead of saying this is one model, this is how we're going to do it. And then it breaks when you realize it's not actually what they want or need.
Thank you. One quick one and then we'll wrap up and get across to the tap room, which is a 10% discount for all blockchain
For all Bruntwood employees, wasn't it?
Yeah, no, just say you come from the meetup, and we've got a little area roped off, so don't worry.
One more.
Quick one, anyone?
Hi, I'm Tom from Astro Labs. It strikes me there are two problems with DAOs. It's too little participation, too much participation. So on the one hand, I seem to remember, I've been in crypto since 2017, I seem to remember ApeCoin, when it first launched its DAO, tried to move to layer 2, and they voted 55 to 45% to stay on Ethereum. Something like that. But I think what shocked me most was there's only 2.5% engagement. So extremely low turnover. And the opposite, of course, is no one's really speaking about elephant in the room, which is the Noun DAO. If I remember correctly, just recently, included or
Yeah, I think they voted to shut down the DAO and run off with the money, which was fine. That's correct?
Yeah, I think what they did was they basically you could not burn your Noun, but it was something like that, wasn't it? Where you could basically take the money and run.
James,
I wasn't in it, but
I think there was so much money in the DAO.
You've got to defend it quick enough. So the proposal was you could burn your DAO, take the share of the treasury and sponsor it. And it created quite a nice, interesting arbitrage opportunity where over the course of a period, they drained a couple of million of ETH from the DAO as the price and then equalized to the book rate. But that's what now.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the whole point, right? The experimentation that we mentioned earlier. They were able to execute something because of the governance that was built into the DAO. Obviously, the DAO ended afterwards, I guess.
It's still going. It's just a coordination failure, really. They couldn't spend the money in the DAO. That was the failure of it. No, they couldn't agree. It was a coordination failure.
And do you just want to answer that one, Lee, and then we'll wrap up just basically on the sort of voter, DAOs suffer from apathy, right?
Yeah.
So what do you do?
Bloody hell, if I knew that.
Thank you, good night.
No, I think other part of it as well is part of the apathy comes from the whale issue, and James, you spoke about this earlier, where you basically look at it and go, there's no point me engaging in this because somebody is just going to come in and just wipe the floor with whatever their opinion is. So I think a lot of the ApeCoin DAO stuff is people hold like a bit and just think there's no point, like it's not going to make a difference, because when you look at the top people that vote, Matches, Mocha, stuff like that,
there are big whales in the community you're talking about there, right?
Yes, yeah. So you're basically looking at what 3 or 4 people do, and there's no point voting against it. So you kind of go, right, well, I'll just not bother, which is why, I mean, it's interesting because the numbers are high, but the people that are voting for them are super low. So it does cause problems. And look, I don't speak for ApeCoin DAO. I'm not an ApeCoin DAO maxi or anything. It's just one that we're actively participating in. But it's the same problem that James mentioned earlier, which is, that you can basically buy results, right? And like, it's kind of weird because I was chatting to someone earlier about, I was saying, like in UK politics, one person gets one vote, but in ApeCoin DAO, you can just buy the win. And it sort of feels like we've gone backwards to some degree. But, that's experimentation, I guess.
Yeah, and I think we've got lots to learn. And I'm going to wrap it there, just so I don't want to drag it on, because I know people might have trains and beers to get to. So I'd like to thank Nick, Lisa, and Lee, and obviously Mohamed, who's left. Hope you enjoyed that. Obviously, this is a community event, so thanks for everyone coming out. Thanks for the sponsors. It's obviously great if we can always have a little bit of pizza. We're going across to the tap room now. If anyone's got any suggestions, we have a Discord. There's people like Ian, Danny, and people who help organise it. Go and speak to them if you want to speak at the next event, get involved. I think we're going to talk more about maybe PFPs and some of the big NFT things that have happened in the last few
that's
years.
the next one, I think.
Yeah, and then we might have some Christmas drinks if anyone's interested. So I'll see you all soon, and thanks again.